do at Express Scripts, and why it's not just pharmacists that we're hiring, why we're hiring engineers. So the work, so we do those 4 times a year. We have one next week, it's already filled. Where my team, I'm just sharing, we actually bring you in. And then the other thing that we try to do is we try to bring you in with organizations that are similar missions to you, but may not be a school district. So for example, we may bring in, if you're looking at STEM, I may bring in someone who is complete, I don't know, I may bring in a hospital who is doing some work along similar to what you're doing, and we align you so that you're partnering with organizations that you can then have a collaborative work relationship with, and maybe do a joint grant to us, because it's trying to, again, I'm trying to ultimately get to the workforce of the future. So how do I do that? So we're asking you to be strategic and not just putting all the onus on us. We're asking you to kind of think about that. But then, so you do the community partner tour, then you come and you talk to us and talk about who you are. So there's we have like a 3-step process that we take you through. And then after we've done that, then we come and see you, as opposed to us coming in. And then while stories are wonderful, and I love stories, I'm also looking for qualitative data. I need to know what it is that you're trying to do, what's the impact going to be, and how you're going to get there. So and I do, so don't get me wrong, because the stories are important, but it's that whole process that we go through of building up that relationship. Does that make sense? So it's a process, and it may take a year to get through all of that before you actually apply for a grant, because I want to know who you are, I need you to know who we are, and what is it that we're all trying to do together. Does that make sense? Okay.
I would say it should take a year, because that is relationship building, and if it's taking less than a year, I mean, if you have a quick fix that you need, I don't know, $10,000, $5,000 for some program that you're doing in your school, and you think you're going to go to a major corporation, you most likely will not get that money from that source within that short time period. That's when maybe you should be looking at your families at your schools. Where do they work?
Yeah.
What foundations are they maybe connected to? Do they have the means to be giving, and they've never been asked? Because if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's sometimes hard to ask, but when you are explaining your story, when you are sharing that data, it becomes very compelling. And I think people want to help in some way if they were just asked.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to weigh in a slightly different way, and I agree with everything that's being said this morning. I think it's sage advice. One of the things that I think is really difficult for a lot of the school districts is I think the starting point and the internal work that needs to happen, right? So we have a fund that we hold at the community foundation called the Reinvest North County Fund, and it is about a year and a half old, right? And it came after the untimely death of Michael Brown. And we've been working with Riverview Gardens, Jennings, Ferguson Florissant, and Normandy schools, quite specifically. And there's a couple of pieces that I want to share as in terms of the sort of transaction. School districts, and this is something that I think will be really important for you all both to be able to address internally and figure out how you can sort of manage this piece, and then also how to communicate this to the funder you're working with. Many of the schools that we work with do not have the organizational systems in place to search, to ask, to then track and report, right? So I spend a lot of time in the districts that we work in, whether that's in North County, whether that's in some of the rural communities, whether that's even in sometimes the private schools. Private schools and charter schools are doing a better job at this. They have to, right, because of how the money historically doesn't come in. But the traditional public schools, this is sort of a new world for them in the last even, kind of 10 years. And so they don't have the infrastructure, right? So we give money, and then I call back and I say, okay, the grant report is due to the funder with what you did with that $80,000. And it's like a fire drill for folks. Like, oh my gosh, and then there was like that teacher, but now I don't know that teacher's here anymore, and like, how do we get those numbers, and where do we find it, right? So thinking about that on the front end, and I will say that I think that one of your best advocates, and if you can sit down and have a very frank and strategic conversation with your superintendent to say, because ultimately for every funder that I work with that funds, unless you're doing donors choose and you want to fund a classroom project, right? That's not the kind of dollars most districts are really looking for. Teachers are looking for that, right? But districts are looking for those bigger relationships. And that cannot happen without the support of the superintendent. And oftentimes, the funder wants to be able to call one office and have that super say, I take responsibility for that 80,000 or 50,000 or 20,000 or whatever it is, and I have a point person on my staff who's going to work with you as the funder to get that done. Because what happens so often is, and there are a lot of funders that'll say, we don't fund public schools. We just don't do it. And some of that is, some of it has to do with incorporation status, right? Like that they don't fund, public. And I get that. And if that's the case, that's actually one of the reasons why we hold some funds. So we hold the foundation for the Ferguson-Florissant School District. We hold it for Grand Center Arts Academy because they can give to us because as a community foundation, we're a C3. So if you're hearing over and over and over again, well, we can't give to schools, we can't give to schools, there are ways to get around that by having strategic relationships. And that's really important. And then, so part of that for us is that when we go into a strategic relationship with a school, we really line up who's going to be the point of contact, what is this going to look like? Because funders, to some extent, they're not accustomed to dealing with school districts. And so they don't understand the challenges that you have when you say, we don't have somebody doing development. We've got a teacher who has a need. We're trying to connect that to the district. We've got a funding formula problem, right? Like it becomes kind of so big it's hard to get your arms around sometimes. And so I think that, really having a super that is on board and understands and is willing to be that advocate and that champion, I think is critical. Without that, really thinking about if you have, now if you're, and I'm going to single out Clayton, sorry, I'm in, we're in the Ladue district, right? You're Clayton, you're Ladue. That's a different animal, right? Like, and not that we wouldn't work with them, we could certainly hold their fund, but they don't need us really to be able to do that, right? They have a different kind of sort of infrastructure going into it. So it's really understanding who your school is and how you plug into the larger community. Because I will make the argument all the time that the single most important boots on the ground place for bringing community together and understanding what's really going on in any community is your school, is your neighborhood school, is your district. Period. They've got their finger on the pulse of, they know what kids are struggling, right? You got it. You've got all of the data. But you've never been asked to collect it, to talk about it, and to track it in a way that works with private philanthropy. And so I think that's really the conversation, the starting conversation that I would have internally for you guys is, can we do that? Can we do it independently? If we're Ladue, we've got a foundation, we can do all that, that's fantastic, right? But if we don't know that we have the bandwidth to do it internally, I will tell you that for school districts who have their own private foundations and try to staff them and in whatever way that works, right? You can talk to CFOs and they'll tell you that sometimes as much as 36, 38, 42 cents on the dollar that they raise actually pays admin and overhead. And when you do it at the community foundation, and this isn't a plug for us to have your funds, because the reality is we're happy to do it. It's not a money-making revenue for us, so I want to be really clear, like this is not a sales pitch. It's for us, on average, the fee for a fund is 0.0125 cents on every dollar. So think about the difference and think about what that means to donors when you're talking about how you're using your resources, right? So I think there are structural things, and I'd love to hear questions that you all have around those kind of structural challenges as well, because I think, I think about the principal in Jennings, Dr. Anderson, who's doing just an amazing, Tiffany Anderson, who's doing an amazing job. But I think about what it has meant for her to be able to tell those stories and learning how to do that and having the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. And I look at other districts and I think they don't have that. So what can we be doing to work with you to help you create that? Because otherwise we're just doing unfunded mandates, which is you've got to do it like this, and you're sitting there thinking, well, that'd be great, but we can't, right? So I'd love to hear from you all. What are some of your challenges in working with funders? None.
Oh, yeah,
Because we're the easiest people in the
we're
world.
the easiest, trust me. And I know how easy it is to get to me, so I'm being really
I can
facetious.
attest to that.
All right, it's not easy. There's like 10 people before you do that. And
I can't even get to her.
no, and I mean, these are my friends, and it's hard. And it's not hard on purpose. It's just hard. I'm going to call your wife and figure out what she does later. I just want you, I'm going to apply. His wife works for Express Scripts, and he couldn't tell me what she did. So I'm calling her, okay, and I'm calling her today when I get in. But it's kind of like Fort Knox sometimes.
Sure.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
what are all of your
Thank you.
roles within
Yeah.
your schools? So are some
Yeah,
of you
thank you.
CFOs or in the finance department, or are you on the technology side? What brings you to this meeting today? Anybody? Shout out.
On the main fundraiser for high schools.
Okay.
Or any, what about you?
I'm not a main fundraiser, but I mean, I've been with the school for about, I guess, now a little over a year and a half. And we've gone through a fundraiser and we've just got a new one in. I don't know that, really the reason why I came here was twofold. One, I thought it looked funny for some infrastructure within the development for a BYOD project, essentially it's a firewall, and that was using very much money. And then we're looking for funding to try and finish the physics lab. And,
Say that last one again.
I just finished the
Physics lab,
Literally
okay.
just put a floor, the building is built, all we need is a floor in it, and some desk, and it'll be done. And literally not, I mean, I'm not talking millions or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm probably talking $80,000, $90,000, maybe, on a bad day.
Mhm.
And so to spend years, I don't disrespect building a relationship with a corporate sponsor to get that done, it's not really, something. And the other thing I want to be clear on is that I'm not the fundraiser for the school. I came here to find information to take back to the fundraisers, okay? I've got a fairly extensive history though, I mean, as far as different areas and that, but a couple of things, I mean, I just, in terms of, the frustrations we face is that, you've got your day-to-day job, so to speak, and then, when you go home and fill out these forms and make the connections with for instance, today, I have other things to do, when do you try and build those relationships? I mean, I'd love to come take a 3-hour tour or 4-hour tour of Express Scripts. I'm sure I'd be very excited about that. I'm sure students would be. But on the other hand, that pulls us away from our day-to-day tasks too. So that's
To your point, there are people in the community that are contracted grant writers, and I mean, I actually work with one because I oversee so much that goes in with development. I'm not the person that sits at the desk and fills out applications. So there are people in the community that work with schools that will help them prepare the grant applications. They'll even do research to find out who would help fund a physics lab, or who would help fund a program to bring a device into the schools and get past that firewall to help raise a little bit of money, or help your team at the school look at your nearest and dearest that may be able to help in some way to get these projects done. And typically those people are not in your school's budget, but what schools will do is they'll bring in a grant writer to help, because hopefully what they're raising is more than enough to cover the expense of bringing a grant writer. So, and not that they would be paid a commission, because that's not ethical, like nobody gets a commission in development. So it has to be, you say, I'm gonna pay this grant writer X, but they're gonna go raise Y, which more than covers that cost. So it might be worth your school looking into if you don't have somebody
the diocese
in a
has
seat.
people that employ from time to time contracts to do that. Right?
Okay,
And that's certainly
good.
happening. But I mean, like I said, keep in mind that, I guess my comment is, time is of the essence, in terms of, once you have a need, the longer you wait to fill that need, the more your school will suffer because of that. So, that's why I said, and I made the comment that, I don't mind going to people that have money to give, but there's no sense knocking on doors, okay, where there isn't money, and especially from looking at again, that's difficult to do, especially when they want to build a relationship. Not that we're not interested in that. But I did want to make one other comment, and that is that schools are not only looking for money. We have a robotics program that we started, and one of the other things that I saw that was kind of lacking is that the ability, and I noticed you help build some vegetable gardens or whatever, but we're really looking for people to come in and help with, the actually hands-on, training of students, in those areas that would then later on help your projects.
So I want to, because there's a couple of things. So remember I said I have diversity, inclusion, and corporate giving. So, and again, there's a reason all of that is aligned. When I think about why I do what I do and why it's important to Express Scripts, I truly am thinking about the workforce of the future. So I know that is tied to STEM. When we talk about the unemployment rate is X, but oh, by the way, there are jobs in these industries if you have the background. There's a reason I'm going this roundabout way. The reason that's important to what you're talking about is when I talk about diversity and inclusion. So I'm not going to talk about corporate giving right now. I'm going to talk about diversity and inclusion. Our employees wanted to get engaged in the communities. So we have 180 different communities that we live and work in. So our employees wanted to get engaged. We created what are called employee resource groups. So out of our 30,000 plus employees, about 10% of our employees are right now in employee resource groups. And each of them, so one group is a women's group. And that women's group is very active, not just internally, but externally as well. One is called Cultural Connections, very active in the communities that we are in. And there's a reason I'm saying this, because our employee resource groups have adopted schools. Our employee resource groups go into the schools and are mentors and advocates for those schools. We have adopted, I said to the organization, we adopted a school at Nance Elementary. Is anybody here from St. Louis Public Schools? So we adopted Nance Elementary. From a resource standpoint, we put a lot of time and energy. I actually meet with that principal on a monthly basis to talk about how do we help kind of change some of the dynamics within the school, how do we help these students improve. Where I'm going with this is there are other things, that's part of building that relationship. It's not just coming to me and asking for those dollars. Maybe there's maybe there's an alumni that I don't know, and we check and we find out there's an alumni who's in one of our resource groups that could be a partner to your school and help us get other resources there. So when you talk about the robotics piece, or you talk about being a mentor or whatever, there's other things that we can do besides, and that helps you. I'll be honest with you, it helps you when you come back to me and say, can you put this in front of the foundation? And I say, okay, well, how many volunteers? Well, we did X number of hours volunteering. Our employees are already active and engaged, because they become your advocates too when I'm reviewing those grants. Does that help? Because there's other ways to do this.
So I'm going to share a little something too, just by way of background, because I often think that there's this kind of, anytime some need comes up, there's this kind of like, oh, we need to go write a grant. So, you know what I mean? We got to go find some money. And so, and I think oftentimes people are like, what does that look like? Where do you start? How would I know where to go? Right? How do I find that information? So I think this is really interesting. There's something really unique about our community as the St. Louis region, as opposed to the rest of the nation, and it affects behavior in this sector. And so I want to share this with you if it's at all helpful. When you look at the philanthropic pie nationally, and then you look at it in St. Louis, and so where the money comes from, in St. Louis, about 75% of philanthropic dollars come from individuals. We outpace the national average, right, by about 2 to 3%. We talk all the time about how we're so generous, and we also talk about giving while living, right? So we've got that. That's fantastic, right? And it's something to feel really good about. Then about, I don't know, my percentages, don't do any math on this, but 6 to 7%, plus or minus, is in endowment and bequest giving. National average is closer to 9%, so we do more giving while living. We are more transactional in our giving, and we tend to not leave legacies behind, which is a shame, because those are the flexible dollars that allow schools and institutions to take risks, or to put in things that just aren't very sexy and nobody wants to, pave a road or a floor or whatever, right? So we don't do a good job in that regard. The other thing that I find fascinating is that in St. Louis, historically, So the national average for corporate giving is about 3 to 5%. And the national average for private foundation giving is between kind of 12, 13, 14, 15%, right? We're the exact opposite in St. Louis. We have a dearth of private foundation resources. We have lots and lots of very, very small family foundations. And those are best captured through the relationships that Ericka was talking about. We think about, and those are not in that 75%. That 75% of individuals, that's checkbook giving, right? Like that's just, transactional. But all those small foundations, they behave, their foundation is an extension of their checkbook, right? And so they behave based on those relationships. We don't have a Kresge, we don't have an Anna E. Casey, we don't have a Carnegie, right? We don't have those large institutions. We have the Missouri Foundation for Health, which is fantastic. But unless you're looking for something, health related, and I don't know that do they give to schools? I have to think about that. I don't know that they give if you're not a C3, right? So there are some challenges there, and the challenge is that you all are often, and folks in your schools are tasked with trying to find, these grants that you can go out and write to people that don't really exist in the community in the way that they do in other communities. Now, we know that the corporate pie is shrinking, right? AB InBev, right? I mean, we understand that we lived in a world where rather than our corporate, mostly fathers, because they were, over time, when they sold companies and they made business transactions, they didn't endow those things into foundations in the community. They continued to give through their corporations, right? So they use their corporations as part of their own personal giving. Well, when that changes and those corporations go away, it really leaves a community in a lurch. And we haven't endowed our community with the kind of foundational assets to accomplish some of the things that you're trying to accomplish. That other communities are able to write some grants, that have these larger foundations in their community. So it's a challenge. So this idea that you're sitting around and we're lecturing you as if the problem is on you, I think is not fair. And I think that, and because we've been so heavily dependent on corporate funding in our community, that changes the behavior of nonprofits. It is absolutely corporations that say, you gotta come to us, it's our money, it's our strategy, it's our strategic, as opposed to private foundations who say, so in my case, my job is to come to you. My job is to come learn about you and to try to help you and support you, right? And we don't have enough of that in this community, and it's a challenge. So know that, and I say that to sort of honor how frustrating this can be for folks. Who are, who don't have the luxury of time or who don't, have sometimes the infrastructure, particularly the public schools. And that we need to do a better job as funders, meeting you where you are, and some are set up better than others to do that.
Do you all have alumni lists? Is there somebody that holds the list at all of your schools? So are any of your schools planning to do a year-end appeal right now? I mean, this is very timely to have this conversation because people start thinking about who are they going to give to around the holidays. So if there's a holiday appeal in the works, or if it's not in the works, it's not too late for it to be in the works. If you've got a good, strong mailing list and you put together a letter, written about that particular need, the physics lab, and maybe you don't know what everybody does professionally on your alumni list, but who knows how many physicists there are, or people in the STEM world that would say, oh, I really wish my school had a physics lab. Like, that's really important. And you say, our goal is to raise whatever that shortfall is that you need. You might be surprised how many gifts start coming in when it's very specific. It's not going to just the black hole of Parkway schools. It would be going to a specific project that's short-term and very clear, and it just may spark something. So for those really quick gifts, a lot of money starts rolling in at the end of December, so it might be worth taking a look at what those needs are, maybe bullet point 2 or 3 of them, and say, if you could help with building a new library in our school, or fixing some of the playground equipment, or fixing or taking care of the physics lab, it may spark something in some of your alumni.
It's also, the other thing to keep in mind is that the majority of corporations have matching gift programs. And so while it's the end of the year, we also, for those, we're looking at our matching gift program, and we need, I've funded X number of dollars. We actually have communication that goes out to our employees as a reminder that, and our matching gift, just so you all know, is only education. So we don't match anything else besides education. So if you have alumni who are employed at Express Scripts, I trust me, send a note out, because our matching gift is only for education. And so there's a certain dollar amount that we give, but imagine if was that Parkway School? Is that or Rosati? Is that Parkway? So, okay, so just imagine, I can just tell you, you send it out to 40 people, we match $1,000, they give you $1,000, you just hit your number. 40 people, right there.
There's another program in the community called Give STL Day. Rosati nailed it the first Give STL Day.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was, they crushed it. Parkway, I know, did some things in Give STL Day, with mixed success, right? And I think, the first time, folks are in, you kind of got to figure out what's your rhythm with these programs. But Give STL Day, it's Tuesday, May 3rd, 2016. It's an online day of giving, 24 hours. There's, we do prizes for the schools, or the nonprofits that participate. We had last year, so the first year we had about 500 nonprofits participate, raised $1 million in 24 hours. Last year we had almost 800 nonprofits participate. We raised $2 million. We're going to do it again this year. I don't know what we're going to get. We're committed to putting this on as a way to help you get in touch with folks. It's a both and strategy. It's being able to communicate with your existing database of alum and people who are in the community, and it's also a way to mobilize them to try to attract new donors, right? And so it's really for general operating support is the idea, but you can tag, and particularly for schools, I think it's actually a better idea to tag a project to Give STL Day. And the reason that I say that is because so many people misunderstand and think that you all have, the biggest problem I think that a lot of schools encounter is that there's we saw this with, no raising, the taxes, it was at Melville, right? Like that people think, the problem isn't that you don't have enough money, the problem is that you're not managing the money well. And I think that is totally wrong, right? And we have some really messed up funding formulas in this state. And I think, so the reality is, getting people to do general operating just because to a school is probably a heavier lift than tagging a project and saying, come together on this day and see what we can do, and this is what we're going to try to do. And you give your alumni tools for them to solicit through email and other ways their colleagues and their friends and their family to say, this school is really important to me, it changed my life, consider a gift of $10 or more, right? And it's amazing what can happen. So be looking for that, and I think that's that we do that, and it's turnkey. We give you all the tools, we give you, all the tweets and the posts, anything that we think you need, the images, everything, to try to be as successful. I mean, you have to come up with a strategy, and you've got to work it on the day, for sure, right? But we want this to be as turnkey for the community as possible, particularly for those folks who have a hard time plugging in those traditional ways.
What was that date again?
I think, I should know this because it's my initiative, but it's on a Tuesday, and I think it's Tuesday, May 3rd, 2016. Okay.
And Giving Tuesday is also coming up. There's Cyber Monday and there's Black Friday,
Right.
Whatever all those days are that are right around Thanksgiving. And there is this Giving Tuesday. And so if you send out an email to your alumni and you link your website to it, if there's a way to give or make a donation through your website, I'm assuming everybody has a website, but if not, get a quick website and then put a link on there to make a donation. But there are other ways, and not just relying on alumni. I mean, at KIPP we don't have an alumni yet, and hopefully when we do, they will be those that are giving back into the community. But our parents are not our donors because we are, 98% students coming from low-income communities. But our teachers have a network, and our Our friends and family are our greatest donors, and so we've reached out from our board of directors contacts and our own contacts, and we've built a mailing list of close to 1,700 people, just of people we know in the community, or maybe people that don't even necessarily live in St. Louis, but they're connected to us, and so they want to give because, again, people give to people, and so it's the relationship. And if you could encourage your staff to give 5 to 10 names, if you have a board of directors and you can encourage them to give 20 names of people that should just be added to your mailing list, not necessarily to ask for money the first time, but to start hearing about what's going on in your schools if you're sending out electronic newsletters and they get on the mailing list, so they can see the great things that are coming out of your districts, the great results, and what the kids are involved with. I mean, it's hard to say no when you see pictures of kids and you say, oh, I want to help. This is our future, and so the more that you can be in touch with your immediate network or your staff's network or the board of directors network, that's another outlet for all of you that would be quicker dollars than necessarily writing a grant.
There have to be questions out there. So we've told you everything, you're ready to go, you're not gonna write grants today, but you're gonna develop those great relationships long term. I knew somebody had a question. All
It's
right.
actually the other presenter.
Oh, you're the presenter, you don't get to ask
You're gonna ask when
questions.
we're done.
All right.
I do have a question for you. So like at Express Scripts, do you guys give preference to people who have family that work at Express Scripts?
What a great question, presenter. And the answer is no. No, we actually, is there preference to any grants? No. I'm going to go back to the preference is, does it align with our mission? And so even if there were an employee, if it didn't align with the mission, then no, I'm not going to do it. So it has to align with the mission. I will tell you what I look at though is not just does it align, but what's the long-term impact? What does it do to the community? All of those things. Is it evidence-based? Look at a lot of different things, but I also look at, are there board representation? So part of that relationship, and Ericka can attest to this, is that I've said this, we need members on boards. So if you have a board, do you have an employee who's on the board? That's the stuff that I look at. Those are the variables that we take into account. And so is there a science, exact science? Not always. But do we look at certain things? So is there an employee, yes, who's on it? I look at it, but that's not the preference that's given. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I know that's different. I mean, truly, it's different for every corporation.
Right.
So, like, Enterprise, a great example is, in fact, the grant actually has to be recommended by an employee, right, at Enterprise, for their kind of small community grant program.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's going to look at it a little bit differently. I know MasterCard, and I don't know where they are now, but I know there was a period of time a while ago where they had so many people sitting on so many boards and felt like that their talent wasn't being asked to participate on boards in the community for what they could give, but rather it was like, we need to find we need to get a MasterCard person, we need to get an Enterprise person, we need to get as if that was the way to get money. And they were actually considering even going to a document that members could take with them to nonprofits to say, I don't come with any MasterCard money. Please don't ask me. Don't think that I'm going to fund your golf tournament, because it's not. We don't work that way anymore, right? It used to be that way. It really did, and particularly at the high levels. And that's because we have that sort of dependency on corporate, philanthropy, and that is changing for a lot, particularly as corporations are becoming these huge multinationals that they're like, Enterprise is like, we can't give to this school, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, so I think it's such a great question, and I think it's a question you should ask every corporation that you come in contact with: is what is it that they're looking for? Is it a board relationship? Is it a staff or employee relationship, or is it none of that? And if it's none of that, then what?
But I'm glad you said that, because each situation is different. And so one of the other things I tell people is that I personally sit on 6 boards. And I said, do you think that's going to help you? Because it really doesn't. I recuse myself from every discussion for every board that I sit on. And so if they were looking for Susan Stith, then that's wonderful. But if they were looking for Susan Stith, who heads up the foundation, then it's a problem. And so in each case, they were looking for me. And so when we put it in front of a board, because we have a board, ultimately that I have to present our recommendations to. When I present those, I say, I sit on this board, so I don't have a vote in the meeting to begin with, but my recommendation is this, but I sit on this board. And so I just need them to all be aware. So I do tell the boards that I sit on. Now, here's the other thing. I only sit on boards that are aligned with the mission of our organization. So I'm very thoughtful about that. And do I have a voice in the room? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean you're going to get dollars just because I sit on that board.
And there's a method to Andrew's madness because he sells Wi-Fi. He's a Ericka person, so he wants to be able to go to the schools and say, well, if you haven't tried this, maybe you should try this. Or if you haven't done this piece, because that's your ultimate goal in the end is to do that. So, he wants to be loaded with information to be able to say those same things. The other thing I would tell you too is to plan ahead, because I think people I'm doing budgets for next year right now, real treat. So everybody knows how much fun that is, but I have to plan a whole year ahead. So when I get calls daily, can you sponsor our golf tournament? Can you provide, sponsor a hole for this? Can do our trivia night? I get that a lot, and they only let me have this extra little bucket for when these last minute things come up, but I'm a year in advance, so talk to people way ahead of time so they can put it in their budget, or simply ask them to put it in their budget or consider it, because I have an ongoing list, and I'll try. I try on the same way. The telethon, same way when I was a little kid. It was like, Dad, I want to call in. Can we give them money? That was the same way.
So a couple of just takeaways that I would want to make sure you guys are aware of, and I mentioned it earlier, but the Pettus Foundation. So if any of you aren't familiar with the Pettus Foundation, Pettus, I will tell you right now, they're in a time of change. They've just started working with the Community Foundation to do their grants management, and they fund education, and they fund vocational education, and they fund STEM education, right? So it's not a huge foundation. They don't have a ton of money. Right now, what happened essentially is that one of the managing trustees passed away, and so the two remaining engaged trustees, one is in Hawaii and one is in California, and then their corporate trustee, which is a bank, here in town, who has, they're going to do whatever it is that the trustee, their job is to support the trustees, and my job is to support the bank, to support the trustees, to make everybody happy, and to bring to them the best qualified applications around education funding. They are honoring some existing pledges that had been out there because they didn't want to be sort of done with that and move on. Just like anything, it's a period of flux. But I would say, if you go to the stlgives.org, if you go to our website, there's a tab for charities, which we're changing. And it'll say Pettus Foundation on there, and you can look at the guidelines and you can look at what they like and you're right, exactly, the areas that they support and that sort of thing. What I would say about that is, if you or anybody in your school is considering applying for funding, call me, because my job is to have a conversation to talk about where they are, what they like. Don't just write a grant. I will help you strategize around what you're looking for and also the timing of it. A great example is, we're getting to the end of the year, and this is the end of their grant cycle. They only have $70,000 to give away, and we've been working with a number of organizations, and then over the transom before the deadline, all these organizations that we've never had any conversation with come in with grant applications totaling now like $350,000, $370,000. But the reality is, and not that they aren't really good, but the reality is, I am more inclined, and the trustees are more inclined, to focus on those where we've been having some dialogue, and we've been helping them prep and get really ready for this moment to be in front of the trustees, as opposed to somebody who just, pulls the grenade and throws, right? At 11:59 when the deadline is 12 a.m. So that's the Pettus Foundation. There's the Innovative Technology Education Fund. We do not work directly with them, but they do have staff, and their job is to go out and, again, they're looking for innovative tech solutions. So it's when you have basic, we need laptops for the kids, they're going to probably say that's not necessarily their definition of innovation, but they're a great resource to tap into. and also to learn, well, what are they looking for? What are they interested in? Because it's sort of the harbinger of probably the world we're all going to be in about 2 years anyway. And then Dana Brown is another one if we're talking about children. And that can be a little bit more difficult because it's held at a corporate trust with U.S. Bank. But we have good relationships with them, and other funders who do are also willing to sort of help you kind of walk through and think through, how do you get into some of these folks that sometimes feel difficult to get in front of. So, I think those, Reinvest North County, if you're in that footprint, is an interesting area. I know the SOAR fund for the Catholics, they're out, the strategic, it's SOAR.
Yeah, just go with that. We all can see it, but we just don't know what it
I don't
stands
know what it
for.
stands for. And they're out looking for dollars for folks. I just did a tour of one of the Catholic schools up in North County, and had the whole presentation and that sort of thing. So, connecting with those resources where you can, and know that, you're always welcome to call me. I mean, my job is to be in the community, and there's, I'm limited often in what I can do, but I am always happy to share what I know. And so even if it's me saying to you, oh, this is the person you want to get in touch with, you're more than welcome to tell them that I gave you their name, right? Like, I'm happy to do that. Sometimes my answer is, I don't know anything about them, and good luck. We can't get in, you can't get in, nobody can get in.
Right.
And that's just the way it is sometimes. But where we can be helpful and try to help guide you, I want you to think of the Community Foundation as a resource to support you in that.
So I want to piggyback on what you just said, because they are a resource, and they're a resource to you as well as to us. So as we were looking at, from an Express Scripts standpoint, how do we fund certain things in the North County area, we're being very prescriptive in where we were going. And so I wanted to look at early childhood programs. All right, so you mentioned you're doing this off the side of your desk. I don't do it off the side of my desk, but trust me, there's a whole lot of people out there that I could be talking to, and I can't talk to everyone, right? So I wanted to look at early childhood programs. I needed someone who was knowledgeable in those programs. So I picked up the phone, and this is who I called. And she was able to point me in the direction of what I needed to look at. That's just with early childhood. It also can happen with college access, college readiness, other types of programs. So we as organizations use these guys as a resource as well, because there is absolutely no way that I can know, I think people think I know, every organization and every person who's attached to that organization can't know it. And I will tell you a little secret. I don't remember everybody's name, but you would never know that. So my husband thinks it's hilarious, and he said, you just have a way when you're talking to people, they think you know who they are, and I'm like in the back going, okay, who is that? I know, it happened yesterday. The person said, we just talked last week. Oh yeah, we did. And so my point to this though is that I could not possibly know every organization. So I do have to have resources, and sometimes I do use these guys as a resource.
So I want to share, you mentioned Dana Brown. I'm going to share my biggest mistake I made probably 15 years ago in this business. So or 10 years ago, I guess. So I mentioned College Bound early on. I had helped start College Bound. It's an out-of-school program, but serves students in the schools as well today. And I'm doing my research, and I'd been on the arts side of education more than I was on the college access side of education before I was at College Bound. And I see Dana Brown is a funder of education. So I thought, okay, this is perfect. I'm going to fill out the application. It's so easy. It's 2 pages. It's like the easiest application, I felt like. So I fill it out. I send it in. I didn't make a phone call first. I didn't introduce myself. They'd never heard of College Bound. We really didn't have any data to show. But I thought, they support kids. They support education. I'm applying. And we got rejected. And we're all looking at each other like, what? How is that possible? They said no to us. Well, they didn't know us. So then, fast forward 2 years, we did our homework, we did our work. We had them out, we introduced them to students, we took them on tours of where we were in the schools, we explained our relationship with WashU, we started to give data because we had data to share, and they became one of the first foundation funders to College Bound. But it was because we did that work that led up to it. So really, my biggest advice is don't fill out a grant application and take that time, because it can be very timely and consuming. Express Scripts is a great example. There's a lot of detail in the Express Scripts application, but it's so worth doing when you have the relationship, because they can picture the students, they know what we're doing, they can see the school, they know what's going on to help make a more educated decision if they're going to fund or not. If I was to come to KIPP and I didn't know Susan, and I just filled out an application and Susan had never visited a KIPP school, I would say 99% chance we would not get funded. Maybe 100%. 100% chance.
But that's important.
It is really important to not just fill out a blank application without having that relationship. It's a lot of time.
And I said earlier that there is a lot of process that goes into that, because there are other people. It's not just, I intentionally put a lot of process in place because I didn't want to be the one person who said yay or nay to whether or not we fund it, because it's not, so we have a review team who reviews every single grant before it even gets to the foundation. So I have 10 people that are cross-functional that look at every single thing, and they question me. So if I haven't had a relationship or a conversation with someone from your team prior to, and I can't answer it, I know that what I can expect when it gets to the foundation. So I don't want to be in front of our foundation and not be able to address some of the things that are out there. So it's really important. The other piece is that, and I'm not sure if other companies do this, but we fund in 2 ways. We fund, so there's another access that you have besides our foundation, and that's through our corporate sponsorships. And so we will fund certain things. Again, we're going to keep saying it, line it back to the mission. But we do fund golf outings. I have to be honest with you, I'm looking at that because that's very labor intensive, and I can never get people to go do the foursome. It's like, I funded it, but nobody wants to go. I can't fill a table for a gala. But we do that. So we have a separate budget that I manage that's for our corporate sponsorships. And so sponsorships could be gala, golf outing, trivia night, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another way in to our organization. But then, so we kind of look at the sponsorships are maybe your entry in. The foundation is your long-term sustainability, and it's programmatic. So sometimes people come in through that entryway, and then we build that relationship, and then we have that programs that we look at from the foundation.
And often funders do not like to support salaries. So
I never support salaries.
Right.
Okay.
So when you are looking to raise money for your schools, figure out what the program is, and often, I say it too, the program is our teachers, like that's the program. But there's equipment that goes along with that, and there's materials, and there's the professional development maybe, or there's how you're supporting kids with special needs, or other programs within your schools. Don't rely so heavily on the salary piece on an application, because that even when you have to show your budget and you show all the salaries, even in a project budget, you're showing salaries. Ask for the things aside from the salaries.
And there's a reason for that, because it's sustainability. So if you ask me for the salary, and yes, it's tied to the program, but if it's only for that salary, my next question is, what happens if I don't fund this next year? Because my foundation is tied to what the market does. So market doesn't, somebody mentioned, what happened in 2008. So let's say that happens again. I don't have the same funding. So if you've come to me this year and it's salary related, I don't, I have to tell you this. I work in a corporation. My sister works for MS. So she's nonprofit, and we're both HR people, right? And I looked at her one day and I said, you couldn't do what I do. And she said, no, nor could you do what I do. And the reason is because, we look at the world in a very different way. I'm looking at big picture, and she said to me one time, Susan, if you take $10,000 off from this organization, that's somebody's salary. $20,000, that's somebody's salary. I'm looking at millions of dollars, and she's looking at this one $20,000 impacts somebody's life in a different way. Trust me, I do look at it that way as well. That's why I think about, don't ask me just for that salary, because that could impact somebody in the next year if we are not able to fund it. So I'm looking at it much more long-term. Does that make sense? So again, it doesn't mean that you can't have it included. Just don't make that, we want this to cover this one new person's salary for this program. The program is the first place, the salary is the second place. Make sense? Okay.
So the other thing that I hear you saying too.
Yeah, my sister's in Tulsa. Okay. All right. Look at us. Okay. All right.
The other thing that I got out of this as well is, even though you don't have the people dedicated to fundraising, except in your case, that you don't have the the employees and the people dedicated, that to hire someone to do that with the stipulation that they bring in more than they're costing the school to do that, which is very likely because that's what they do for a living, correct?
Well,
Is that
right,
kind of Mary on that?
Here's the thing, like, families are investing in their schools and the schools are investing in their schools, and the schools have so many needs. So without having an organization to help or a dedicated staff to help, like, it's worth the investment. If you're gonna invest in a new HVAC system, why would you not invest in someone to help raise the money to make those things possible? So it makes sense to me.
Is this helpful? Do you feel like you're getting tidbits that I could see everybody's wheels turning? I was like, okay, I need to get on that community partner tour. I need to build a relationship, but it is real. It is, and I know that there's short-term needs as well as those long-term. What I'm talking about is long-term, but I'm also giving you some entrees into kind of some short-term. You know, reaching out to your alumni, reaching out to your, knowing that there's matching gifts out there. That's real, that's tangible, that's today. I've got a budget that I need to exhaust before the end of the year with matching gifts. So if I were you, I'd be, calling those people whose kids or parents right now, because that's an opportunity to fill some dollars immediately.
The other thing I would say is to plug into a couple of really key resources. So if you're thinking about grants management, there's a St. Louis chapter of the Grants Professionals Association, GPA St. Louis, and you can find some incredibly talented professional grant writers in that group. You never know, they might have a connection to, your school and say, oh, I'd be willing to do that for half or for nothing or whatever, right? Like, but then I think you're really getting quality. The other, obviously there's, AFP, which is the Association of Fundraising Professionals. It's a little bit different animal for you guys because, again, to say, I can't take all the time out to go to a lunch and to do all that kind of, I have another job I have to do, right? So that's sometimes is a challenge. The other organization, if you're not familiar with the Nonprofit Services Center, NSC, Diane Drollinger runs that group, and they're over off of Brentwood, and they do a ton of technical training, capacity building for nonprofits. They do webinars, so things that you can do from your desk to help kind of continue these conversations and to continue these learning things. Maybe you can bring in a team. They used to use this woman, Glenda O'Neill, out of California, who wrote federal grants and had a 100% success rate in her grant writing. It was unheard of, and she finally retired, and it was, everybody's like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? How do you replace a Glenda? There are resources out there to connect to. The other reason I say that is to get on those mail lists, to get multiple people in your institutions, on those mail lists. Get on the STL Gives. If you go to our website, there's a place in there where you can put your profile for your school district into a database that is searchable by every donor at the community foundation. So if they're looking for an education, or they're looking for new projects, or they're looking to connect with people, that they can actually just connect with you directly, and they don't even have to call me, right? Our job is to help try to facilitate, right? We don't do matchmaking because there's 13,000 nonprofits and a whole bunch of donors, and there's one me. So I have to be sober, but we try to create tools, to help make that happen, right? And those are also tools that, when there are grants that are coming down the pike, they'll announce them through those channels or programs that you'll want to participate in. There's a huge HUD grant, a resiliency grant, that's being written. It's $40 million, and it's all about the North County area. It's not related to the civil unrest necessarily. It was actually related to a flooding incident and the Good Friday tornado. But it's Rockefeller and HUD, the state of Missouri, and we're having conversation with them to bring in community partners. And one of the things that really means is making sure that you guys are on those lists, so that when that there's a lot that you're going to just delete, but every once in a while you're going to go, that's my footprint, I'm on the ground, I'm in that community, I need to be at that table, right? Because there are potentially some things that are going to be going on that affect us. And so I would encourage you to get on those kinds of mail lists. We have a couple of mail lists that you can get on that, will communicate this stuff to you all hopefully in a timely way.
Any other questions? I have a question for Megan. So, yes, for you.
Oh.
So as people are sitting here, and I'm sure the light went on, and some people are saying, "Wow, I wish my superintendent saw this." So we could go back and relay all the information. Is there any way they can pull this up or look at it, or what's the best way for them to review?
Yes, well, there are some key points that I took from these ladies and tweeted them using the hashtag that is up there. You can also follow at Tech Electronics, and it's at tech_elec, and you will be able to find our Periscope video of this conversation, of this discussion, to take that back to your superintendents. And I will be saving this because Periscopes do expire. I will be saving it, and if you need it in the future, I will be able to send it to you. So there are different ways that you can get this discussion, and all these lovely ladies are on Twitter, so if that is some way you want to connect with them as well. There is STL Gives is Mary. It comes up Wendy on your Twitter, by the way.
Oh, okay, that's a different staff person who set
Oh.
up the account.
Oh.
Okay. And then
All right, Rebecca over here. Okay. All right, we're sorry. All right.
no, it's fine.
All right.
So and then KIPP is KIPP STL. Are you the one that manages that?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
And-
it's either me or Lauren, who I work closely with.
Okay. And then Susan is Express Stith, and it's her last name, Express.
Isn't that cool? Come on. Isn't that really good? All right, that gets a prize. I'm just telling you, that gets a prize. And it gets a prize because my kids did not realize that I was following them. They thought it was Express Stith. They thought it was Express Scripts. And I said, I'm seeing everything. And they were like, how? Because it's Express Stith. They were like floored. They were like, you're that creative, Mom. So I just want to share.
I thought it was pretty creative.
All right.
There are a lot of ways to get this information again if you do need it. And then I, of course, can give you my card, and you can email me, and I can send you the discussion.
We're in the process of doing a huge upgrade on our website, so hopefully that'll be another place that you can visit and be able to review those videos as well.
Our YouTube page as well.
And maybe ask your superintendents to share it with your boards.
True.
And if it's helpful, from a strategy standpoint, if you want to call, I'm happy to go out and meet with superintendents, and I'm happy to go out and be part of presentations that help strengthen the infrastructure of public schools to really help people understand what's needed in order for you to be successful. And I'm more than happy to be a resource in that regard for you all.
And that's perfect. You guys did a wonderful, wonderful job. And we came up with this because it's always the question of we need security in our schools, and there's so many spots that we can't see anything, and people are really worried about their kids in school because the first thing people are going to do is want to protect their children. So the challenge we always have, what does everyone tell a technology company when we want them to spend money? You don't have any money, okay? In fact, we need you to take this old analog stuff and figure out how we can get some money for it so, we can start over. So that's the part. We try to do return on investment too, so it's not as much pain when you go to invest in new technology, but we wanted to stir it up a little bit because it is the same old story. We don't have the money, and we get it. Nobody wants the best. Everybody wants the best, but you go to the bid and you have to pick the least. So the important thing was we wanted to give you another way to be able to afford technology. So I really hope this helps. I think you guys did fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.